Hey, what's up? David Wood here for theblendmode.com and welcome to another exciting GIMP tutorial. In today's tutorial, we are going to be creating some unique fireworks or spark effects using built-in filters within GIMP. This is actually an update to an old tutorial of mine, if I switch to my desktop here, that I made back in 2009 when I was still making videos with a couple of other guys in high school at the time called everythingeffects.tk. And overall, the effect hasn't changed too much. It's still pretty similar to what I did back then, but I thought it was time to make an update for this anyway to see if we could come up with something that works a little bit better and also with less noise in the background. I recorded this on the family desktop in the living room with my brother and sister in the background making noise, so it's definitely could use a little TLC. So we're going to go from this example in the original tutorial to this right here. This is the first method that is the same method used in the original. And we're also going to be creating an effect using the GIMP gradient flare filter. And the results look kind of like this. So overall, pretty easy. Let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. We're going to start by creating a new image, and we want this image to be square. Because we're going to use a tool in GIMP called polar coordinates, and it just works better with a square image. Rectangular images don't work so well. So we're going to make a new canvas 1000 by 1000 pixels, and we'll hit OK. And right now it's white, and I want to fill that with black first. Once it's filled with the black, there's a couple different things here that we can do. We can either grab the free select tool, and we can kind of just roughly make a circle around like that. It's easier to just make a circle with the ellipse select tool like this. But if you want to make some fireworks in a custom shape, then you can also do that. So again, I'm just going to freehand this because it's easier. If you wanted to, come up here and make a heart like that, you could do it. If you wanted to make a star like that, that would work too. Any shape will work with this method, as long as you can kind of roughly guesstimate where the center of this image is going to be for later. But for this, all we're going to do is we're just going to take the ellipse tool. We're just going to make a circle, kind of corner to corner like this. And we're going to take this and fill it with some noise. So we'll go to Filters, Noise, HSV Noise. And in here, we want to set the saturation to 0. We don't need any other colors. We just want black and white. And we'll take the value and we'll push that up. And then this dulling, we're going to move this to the right to like 6 or 7. And this will remove a lot of the contrast from it and make the noise more or less gray instead of white. And we'll hit OK. And then we'll select None. And then we'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And the default at 1.5 works just fine. We'll hit OK. And then we're going to go to our Levels adjustment. So we'll go to Colors, Levels. And basically what we want to do is we want to take this blurred noise here and we want to add some contrast back in, but we don't want all of the noise to be visible. We want it to be basically some larger particles and a couple of smaller ones. But we don't want it to be too dense, basically. So in here, we're going to take this gray mid-tone slider and we're going to push it to the right towards the highlights. And basically what that is saying is it's saying take the shadows of the image and fill more of the midtones with it until they kind of disappear like this. And you can see the image just kind of vanishes. But then we'll take the white slider on the right and we'll move this to the left and we'll push it and push it and push it until the image kind of comes back. And you can see with the blurring that we put on there, now this noise map looks a little bit bigger. It's not as small as it once was, which works out pretty well. But this is obviously a big contrasted mess. So we'll move this white slider down just a little bit. We'll take the black slider all the way on the left, move that to the right as well. Again, this is just bumping up all of the shadows like that. And we can move the gray slider a little bit closer to the white one, move the white one up a little bit again. Kind of like that. Overall, that looks pretty good. Next, this is just a personal thing that I do, but I don't like having too many particles kind of in the center of this firework. I like to have a little bit more space in the middle. So I'm just going to grab my gradient tool. I'm going to use a black to transparent gradient set on normal with a shape of radial. And from the middle here, I'm just going to kind of guesstimate where this is, more or less. I'm just going to kind of make a shape kind of like that, just to kind of hide some of those. And now we're going to go to Filters, Distorts, Polar Coordinates. And polar coordinates is a really fun tool to use. Basically, what this does is it's taking our image right now, and it's saying that whatever is at the top of the image should be folded in on itself. So it basically brings the bottom up and around. Kind of like if you're making a donut, if that makes any sense, if you're wrapping the shape of a donut and connecting it. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to uncheck this box called To Polar. And what that does is instead of taking the top of the image and folding it in, it does the reverse, and it takes the center of the image and folds it out. And so these, you can see these particles up here at the top. These are what were in the middle of the image before, but now they're all stretched out because they got pulled out to this top. So we'll do that, and we'll hit OK. And that looks pretty cool. We're going to hit Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. In here, we can unlink the X and Y. And we're going to set the X to 0. And we're going to bump up the Y just a little bit, just to create a little bit of motion from these particles, because right now they're kind of just static. And we're just going to bump that up probably 3 or 4. That looks pretty good, and hit OK. While we're at it, we can go back into levels, and you guessed it, we're going to crush these blacks again, bump up these whites again, trying to get as many of these particles, a lot of these smaller particles to just kind of disappear, basically, like that. And I'm just going to redo the Gaussian blur just a little bit, probably with like a factor of 2. Okay, that looks pretty good. From here, we're going to go to Filter, Distorts, Wind. And Wind is a really fun filter that basically takes any highlights in the image and adds a like little trailing tail in a direction that you pick. All we have to do is set that to top, because remember, the top of this image is the center of our firework. And we have a couple different things here. The edge affected, we can leave this at leading. That looks the best. There's a style option, which if we click on that, we can do either wind, which is kind of this nice kind of fading trail, but there's also blast, which makes it a much harsher line. We're going to leave that on wind. The threshold basically is saying how picky it is over what is considered a highlight and what should get this wind trail. So if you take that and you put it at 0, it removes all limitations of what's picky. It says anything goes. Anything can have a tail. And it creates an image like this. And it's cool, but it doesn't really fit what we're doing here. So we're going to put the threshold probably at like 2 or 3. Something like that. And then there is the actual strength, and that is how strong and how long the tail is. So we can bump that up, or we can lower it. Again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. I think something kind of in the mid-range, kind of like this, like between 1 and 15 actually works pretty well for this. And then we'll hit OK. And there you have the basics of the firework, aside from running polar coordinates again. And this is actually a pretty cool method if you wanted to add like a meteor shower effect to, some sort of sky replacement scene. So there we go. We'll take this image now. We'll go to Filters, Distorts, Polar Coordinates. So we don't have to touch any of these settings. To Polar is selected, map from top. This one, actually, if we hit map from top and uncheck it, basically, instead of saying take the top and make it the middle, it's saying take the bottom and make it the middle. So it can reverse this image like this. And that actually looks pretty cool. You could use this for a couple different things, but it looks like something's imploding, which is pretty neat. But a firework obviously explodes outward. So we'll leave that checked, and we'll hit OK. And basically, our firework here is done. All we have to do is then take it and put it in a scene. and then just size it down, set it to screen, and call it a day. But how do we make this second method? Well, let's go ahead and jump into that one. This one, we don't even need to make another image to create this on. We can do it all within this one stock image. So for now, I'll hide this other firework effect. And I'll go to the background layer, and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to make this black, hit OK. And we can just set the blend mode of this to screen. Now we're going to go to Filters, Light and Shadow, Gradient Flare. And Gradient Flare is a really fun plugin with a lot of strength that most people kind of ignore. Let's see, so let me kind of reset some of these back to where they were. Basically, in the preview area here, when you click on a space, that is the center of your flare. That's where it's going to originate. And unlike the normal lens flare effect filter that doesn't have any actual settings, this one, you have to manually control where all of the adjacent and secondary flares appear. So with the basic lens flare, if you put it in the top left, then the secondary flares will shoot to the bottom right. If you put it in the top right, they shoot bottom left. You don't have to do that with this one. Instead, you basically pick where the center of the flare is going to be, and then there's some options to change over here. So you can change the radius of this, you can make it larger or you can make it smaller. You can change the color of the flare itself, of what these gradients actually look like. There's a rotation option, which depending on the flare you're using will change the direction of the rays inside of it. There's the vector angle, and the vector angle actually controls the secondary flares if you want them to rotate or to shoot off in a specific direction. And then the length basically controls like how close or far they are from that center flare. And there's a couple built-in presets. This is Bright Star, there's a Classic, there's a Default, there's a Distant Sun, there's a G Flare 1, G Flare 2, and a Hidden Planet. And they're all pretty cool. We're going to create a custom gradient flare ourselves. And I already have one here called Firework, but I'll show you how to make it. So click on New. I'm just going to call this Firework 2 because I already have one. You can just call it a Firework and hit OK. And once we're in here, we're going to go to Edit. And in here, we can edit the glow, which is the main center of the flare. You can edit the rays, which are these like spikes of light that shoot off from the center of it. And then there's the secondary flares, or the adjacent ones that kind of shoot off in other directions. And we only need the rays. So we're going to take the paint options here that say opacity. And for glow, we're going to set this to 0. And for secondary flares, we're going to set that to 0. So we're left with just these little spikes of light, these rays right here. Then we're going to go to the Rays tab, and this is where we're going to play with it. Now in here we have 3 different options. There's a radial gradient, an angular gradient, and an angular size gradient. And the radial gradient is whatever gradient you pick. It's saying whatever color starts on the left and then goes right. The left is the center of the flare, and the colors going to the right are the outside edge of that. So if I take this radial gradient and just set it to a foreground to background, so black to white, you can see that in the middle, it's black, and then the outside edges, it's white. And you can run through all of the built-in GIMP gradients to find something you like. There's all kinds of cool options here that you can just cycle through with your mouse scroll wheel. And all of them create something that's pretty cool. I like that one quite a bit, the dark one, or the deep sea. And you can play with this and make all kinds of unique things for this. But the one that looks really, really good in this case is going to be blinds. And blinds is a series of 3 lines here that goes black to white, black to white, black to white. That's what we're going to use. For a second, though, I'm just going to set this back on white, just so you can kind of see everything that's going on. So that's how the radial gradient works. The angular gradient, if I set this on black to white, this one controls the colors going around spikes here. So you can see that basically if straight up is 0, then this starts at like 90 degrees to the right. And it starts black, and then it fades to gray, and then fades to white. And again, this is one of those things where you can come through here and you can pick like all kinds of different shapes and different colors to come up with something unique. And this is another way of actually getting the spark effect. If you want them to be kind of directional, is pick one of these gradients that has kind of a very sharp contrast from a quick black to white, like this dark one, or let's see, which one is it? Like burning transparency. That one also works the same, so it goes black to like a really hot red and yellow, then kind of fades to an orange and then transparent. Again, lots of different options here. All kinds of fun things that you can play with and create different effects. And if you wanted a firework that was all the colors, you could throw that in there too if you wanted. But basically, we're going to set this to random. And it basically makes like a barcode of varying whites to blacks, because we don't want them all to be solid white. And then the size one, this one is actually controlling how long the spikes are from 0% to 100%. So if I set this to black to white, and again, it is going black to white, going from 0% size to 100% size, and it makes this cool kind of spiral shell Fibonacci circle right there. It looks pretty neat. And for this, that's going to be on random too, so these are different lengths. Okay, so once those are on random, the radial gradient, again, should be set on blinds. That's the best looking option in my opinion. And we don't have to touch any of these other settings. We can if we want to, but we don't really have to. The number of spikes basically controls how many of these spikes appear. And each time you add a spike, it's basically like if this was like a pizza, the more spikes you add, the more slices of pizza it's cut into. And they start to kind of crowd each other out if you get too high. The spike thickness, again, these spikes don't go to the edge of their slice of the pie, basically, unless you tell it to. Normally, they're kind of like half the size. So if you take the thickness and you made it all the way, then it would actually spread to the outside edge, which you can make some cool stuff with this. You can make like a dartboard or something. It reminds me of the Funimation intro that they play before their dubs and stuff. We don't need it to be that big, and obviously we don't want it to be too narrow either. So between, let's see, usually between like 20 and 30 is where it looks best. And once we have that, we can also play with things like the rotation. This doesn't have any color, so the hue rotation doesn't matter at all. So something like that, and we'll hit OK. And now every time we click on this, it will randomize the direction and some of the shapes to this firework. So we can make this a little bit bigger. Click on randomize again. And right now it's on a black background, so we want to put this kind of in this corner of the sky. So we're going to just click up in here until we find something that we like, kind of like this. Might make that a little smaller. And again, it randomizes every single time you click on it. That probably looks pretty good. And then we'll hit OK. And there's like the basic of the firework for this. We do need to do a little bit of adjustment, because if you notice the blinds gradient, this last one here does this weird like sharp line from white to gray. And we kind of want to fix that. We don't want that to be there. So we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Motion Zoom Blur. And we're going to change the center of this. So we're going to click on the arrow. We're just going to kind of put it like here-ish, I guess. Down a little bit. We're basically going to center that blur a little bit, kind of like that. And we can lower the blurring amount. We don't need it to be anything crazy. We just want to basically remove that sharp edge. We could go the other way maybe. I'd say that probably looks pretty good. And then we can hit OK. And that's the basics of that firework. So now we've got two different versions here. One using the noise filters and polar coordinates, and the other just using the gradient flare. This one needs a little bit of TLC, so I'm just going to come in here, add some contrast, bump up the brightness so that it matches the other one. And that actually looks pretty good. In fact, I could even take these and kind of overlap them like this, overlay them, and make a pretty sweet firework. As I said, these two methods actually work really good to support each other. But we'll leave them separate for now just because I think it looks better that way. We need to add some color to these. So I'm just going to take this first one here. I'm going to duplicate this layer twice. And the second copy, I'm just going to add a quick blur to it. And again, this is just for the sake of making it look more like it's actually part of the scene. I'm going to take the second copy, add a larger Gaussian blur to it, like that. Kind of merge these together. Set that back on screen. And then we can go in and we can color this with quick curves. Let's make this one blue, so we'll bring down the red channel, bump up the green a little bit, take the blue, bump that up a little bit, and then just play with the value itself. Something kind of like this. All right, there we go. So we got a nice blue firework. Overall, I'm happy with that one. This image up here, I'm going to make a black background to merge that onto, so that way I get rid of this border. So merge that down, set this on the screen. All right, we're going to do the same thing as the other one. We're going to duplicate it twice. The second one, going to add a quick Gaussian blur, kind of like that. Then the second copy, a larger Gaussian blur. Let's see, something like that should work pretty good. Merge these down, set it back on screen. Quick color correction. This one, this bright orange that we've got going on here from this H&M building, I like it. So we're going to bump the red up, bump the, let's see, might bring the green up a little bit in the highlights, and then down a little bit in the shadows. Take the blue, bring that down. That's pretty good. Actually, you know what? I want to make this kind of a darker orange, kind of like that. Something that kind of match that better, I think. And then we can go to the values and again, just kind of play with this, adjust it. And there you go. You got two quick and easy fireworks inside of Gimp using two different methods. And again, go ahead, take these methods, stack them on top of each other. It would look pretty cool. And you can, add more glows, play with the volumetrics in it and stuff. This is just the really nitty gritty of how to make this work. If you wanted to add some, let's say, cloud texture to this image here, we're going to take this, we're going to make a new layer, make it black. I'm just going to merge these layers down on top of it. I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur on top of it. Make a new layer above that. Go to filter, render, noise, solid noise. We're going to do just a real quick little noise map on top of this, just for the sake of this tutorial. I'm going to have a more in-depth tutorial on some volumetric lighting and stuff later, so look out for that. Set the blend mode to overlay. That doesn't look too bad. We need to remove some of this contrast though, because we don't want this to be too dark and we don't want that to be too light. So if I bump that up, kind of like that. And merge that down. There's our nice kind of volumetric glow, and that looks pretty cool. So we can set this on lighten. Might set it on screen or dot or add, depending on how this comes out. All right, I guess I'm going to set that on add. And that actually works pretty good. It basically adds some of the cloud back into this background here. And I think that looks pretty cool. So yeah, there you have it. Two easy methods for creating some fireworks, some spark effects, some warp gates, I don't even know, star travel effects. There's all kinds of uses for this effect using polar coordinates and the wind filters. Those are both really fun. And of course, gradient flare is a very powerful tool. I definitely recommend that you explore it yourself and create something neat with it. My name is David Wood for theblendmode.com, and I will see you guys next time.